Let's go! See, you had your flags ready. How incredible. How are the Guatemalans doing? Look, Canada, Colombia, Venezuela, Honduras, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Costa Rica. I already said Colombia. The Colombian flag, Argentina, Peru, Chile. Come on, come on, come on. Don't stop that applause. We're transmitting live. What pride, everyone with their flag. We're transmitting live to the rest of the world, firm like a bear claw. Look at that. Focus on the Guatemalans who are up front. Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. God is in the house today. There's a celebration here at River, ladies and gentlemen. How great. Please rest, battalion of God's army. Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all those connecting from other parts of the world. We have sung, we have worshipped, we've prayed for our seeds, for our offering. And now, what? Just about a minute ago, we just connected to all the people that are watching on the other side. And we're always very happy, very joyful, because every time we gather here at River, that marvelous atmosphere is generated, the one that we feel, the one that we have here. So we're very happy. There's a revolution going on with these last two messages. One of them was called, Dear God, I fattened the baby. The other is, Jesus no longer wears a beard or sandals. And the second is a continuation of the first, and the people are very happy. They feel set free. Others are very angry, saying, Dante says the Bible doesn't exist. People always keep the title, but those of us that listen to the messages know that God takes us towards a more intimate relationship with Him each time we love Scripture more and more, not less. The more you fall in love with the Lord, the easier it is to live in holiness and to love Scripture. When you're not as in love with the Lord, it's harder. But when you love the Lord, it's impossible to love the Lord and not give. Can you give without loving? Yes. Yeah, there are people that give just to save on their taxes. There are people that start foundations to pay less taxes. They say, instead of giving it to Uncle Sam, I'll give it to the poor, so I don't have to pay so many taxes. But you cannot love without giving. Those that love give. Those that say, I love God and my neighbor, but they can't let go of a single penny. And they're devout followers of stinginess. They don't love, but we love. And so we carried out Mission Chiapas this week. I want to give thanks to all the volunteers. Come here, Guillermo. Our mission in Chiapas was extraordinary. We went to Mexico. We went to the community of Velendos in Chiapas. It's an indigenous community displaced by violence in a territory that has housed them for about 50 years. Their life is very precarious. We're looking at images now. They don't count on adequate infrastructure. They don't have access to running water, drinkable water. They have scarce resources, so we came to better their lives just a little bit. Come tell me what happened with this group in Chiapas. They left on Tuesday and returned yesterday. Yes, Pastor, it was truly incredible to see all these children happy, as you can see in the pictures. That was part of the welcome as we were arriving. What happens in these communities is that they're very shy, and it's tough for them to express themselves. But we saw smiles. In these 3 days, once we were finishing the work, there was such joy in the children, and the people that lived there said they didn't really see that often, but the children were jumping with joy. But we were able to see those children happy, content. There we began construction. What you're looking at now, or what you were looking at previously, was the dining hall. It was the dining hall for the children. And there we'll be giving breakfast from here on out. We're going to be providing breakfast every morning. That's the water tank. They didn't have drinkable water either. They didn't have potable water. So we provided that. There you can see it has the River logo. I'm sorry, but besides that, we're also going to sustain them. It's not that we just went once in a political way and then we're going to disappear. No, it's the same thing that we're doing in Africa, the same we're doing in Cuba. After we sustain them every month, we don't stop blessing them, because you told me that they had that fear that we would just disappear. Yes, yeah, the thing is that politicians go there very often. They promise them many things and they fail them. They don't do what they promise. So as we began to go, they were doubting. They asked, who are they? They thought we were drug dealers. You see, God is speaking to you. No, they literally thought that. Of course, because they were asking why. When the offering is too big, even the saints distrust. We promised them so many things that they were in awe. And they began to see as the days went on, as the weeks went on, as the months went on, and we began construction, they saw that it was actually true. See, there we built new bathrooms. Well, they didn't have any bathrooms. There was no running water. So we gave them restrooms. There you have a child washing his hands. It turned out so nice. I insist, this is an indigenous community that never receives anything. They were also telling us that they have to vote. Even though they don't have anything, they still have to vote. But obviously, they feel used many times because they aren't given anything. Chiapas, this sector, do you remember what sector of Chiapas this is? It's in Tuxtla Gutierrez. The community is called Belendos. This is the Benito Juarez school. There we're remodeling the classrooms. We painted all the classrooms. We decorated everything as best as we could. We provided all the teachers educational material. We gave the children little backpacks with school supplies. They didn't have any of this. We gave them uniforms as well. There you see the children receiving their backpacks. Look at their happy faces. They have such joy. And we also have to highlight that our volunteers, those that you're seeing in the pictures, they paid their own flight, their own hotels. So this is literally giving. They asked for a week off from work because the majority of them work. They asked for time off from school because they study as well. And so tears escape you because you ask, how can we accomplish this with volunteers? These aren't paid workers. These are all volunteers. People that say, I want to serve, I want to give. They were giving them internet because they had no Wi-Fi signal. What did we take? The Elon Musk Wi-Fi? Yes, the Starlink antenna. It's satellite internet that allows them to connect. Politicians will never give this to them, and this isn't criticism to the official government in Mexico. No, this happens in any one of our countries. It happens in my Argentina where politicians, people that aren't business people, people that aren't as useful are sometimes the most relegated. And so when you go and you take these things to them, they can't believe it. Look at the celebration. Look at all the shirts there. Yeah, we had so many volunteers. I also want to give thanks to the volunteers in Mexico that joined our team. Here we have the children celebrating. We had clowns. We had a great show. The children were happy. That was one of the objectives, of course, for the children to be happy, and of course we were able to accomplish it. This is your seed, church. Thank you, Guillermo. Thank you. This is your seed. This is our seed. This happens all over the world thanks to your seed. Give that grand applause to the Lord because we are happy, because we can give, we can sow. And this is just getting started. Now, are we ready for God to speak to us? Yes or no? Very well. Today's message is directed especially to those that have, at one point or another, through the windows of our heart, have been able to see God in a transparent, lush, clear way, especially when that window of our heart was intact, transparent. There was a moment in our life, a season, in which we could see God in a very vivid way. The glass in our heart, always speaking in metaphoric terms, of course, they were clean, stainless, and we believed that we already knew God. That season where we would say, I know how God works, I know how He speaks, and I know what His perfect will is in my life. There are moments in life where we get a little petulant and we think that we know God's recipe already, or that God is a menu and we have the recipes. We say, I know how God speaks, I know God's voice. So we're Christians, but without too many surprises, without anything unexpected, without any surprises. We know that God has a perfect will for us, and I insist, it appeared that we always knew exactly what it was, and we never moved from that center. But then a season came in which that window of the soul cracked. A pebble came along, broke it, and shattered it. I'm speaking about that unexpected pebble of pain that came along, despite the fact that we did things the right way. We loved God. We believed that our relationship with Him was intact. That pebble could have been one that somebody threw at us when we were children, maybe when Dad left the house and abandoned us, or maybe our childish heart absorbed the impact, went on ahead, but ended up breaking during our adolescence. During our adolescence, we did catharsis of everything that had happened to us during our childhood, and we went through a season of rebellion that didn't end when we became adults. It even goes on today, because something unexpected came along. Or maybe the window of our soul shattered as adults, and it came in the form of a phone call, sometimes from a police station, sometimes from a hospital, a medical diagnosis, a text message, a certified letter from the court, whatever it may be. Whenever that pebble came along, it caught up to us unexpectedly. And whatever the form or shape of that pebble is, the result is always the same. A window, that shatters. The pebble crashed against the window panel and destroyed it. And that blow resounded through the hallways, the corridors of our hearts. And from that precise point of impact, a web of fragments developed. And from then on, God was no longer easy to see. This message is directed to those that say, from that misfortune, after that misfortune, the vision that it had of God was no longer so fresh. It suddenly changed. We try to see God after the tragedy or after the blow, but it's as if his figure is distorted. I insist. It's like trying to look through a windshield or a shattered windshield or a shattered window. The picture's always distorted, and it became difficult to see God above our pain. Sometimes it's very difficult to see God above the fragments of our wound. Fundamentally, because we're full of questions, and we reason, if God loves me, then He shouldn't have allowed certain things in my life. Why did He allow them? As mature as we are, we always say the phrase, tragedies shouldn't be in the Lord's agenda. I can't understand how a God of love can allow that. I'm talking about divorces, cancer, illnesses. Let's not even mention abuse in children. Even Christian children from Christian families suffer this. And you ask, why? And from the moment that rock comes crashing, that glass becomes a reference point in our lives. And from then on, we divide life into a before the pain and life after the pain. Like a break in the waters. There's a moment in life. And I'm not talking about, a minor detail. Maybe a math test that we fail or a traffic ticket. No. I'm talking about those tragedies that literally divide our lives in a before and after. And life is no longer what we knew. Before our pain, we could see God and feel Him very close. We could pray, we could see God and say, there He is. After the pain, it was more difficult to see and feel God. Not because God distanced Himself, but our paradigm, our perspective changed. It's as if having gone through that unexpected crisis, well, it didn't eclipse God, but we do feel that it took God from our sights. And in a strange way, it's difficult for us to pray now, for us to seek God, because we were disillusioned by God or with God. I know God is sovereign, He knows what He does, and He doesn't have to ask anyone for permission. And we can hear that hundreds of times. Even then, that disillusionment is still there. It would be foolish to say, no, it doesn't hurt because we know God is God. Of course it hurts when something happens to us. The majority of us can complete this phrase that begins by saying, if God loved me, then... And we can finish that sentence by saying, then He wouldn't have allowed this cancer. If God loved me, then my child never would have been buried before myself. God never would have allowed the church to be divided by gossip, and pastors have asked themselves this. I have colleagues that say, I can't believe that after all that I fought against in the church for 30 years, that just because of some gossip or because somebody brought up a lie, that half the congregation left. You ask, why does God allow it? You can always look for a foolish, human, logical explanation, but you continue to ask, if God loved me, He wouldn't have allowed that hunger, that earthquake, that tsunami, or that a bus full of children crashes on the way to a summer camp. So that phrase, if God loved me, this wouldn't have happened, that defines the expectations that we have of God. And when that pain comes into our lives, when that pebble shatters the window of our hearts, it's logical that the doubts rise to the surface. When life hurts a whole lot, you even begin to doubt God, and this doesn't respect anyone's spiritual stature. Even a preacher can doubt, those that consider themselves apostles, or even the newest member who just joined last week, we all doubt. Because the fragments of that broken glass make our vision opaque, and we're no longer so sure of what we're even looking at. We congregate, we come here, but we're not so sure of what we're looking at, of what we're feeling. And that is precisely what happened to the disciples during a stormy night, a historic stormy night in which they thought that what they were looking at wasn't what they were actually seeing. They weren't sure of what they were seeing, just as it's happened to us. The story is very well known. All the same, I'm going to summarize it. Jesus, as He walked on this earth, He finishes preaching. He says goodbye to the multitudes to go to the mountain to pray for a moment of meditation. But beforehand, He sends His disciples to navigate the sea. He says, go ahead of me and I'll catch up. Matthew, the evangelist, is very specific of the order of the events. It's an intentional, arbitrary order because it has a whole lot to do with what's about to develop. He says that Jesus sends the disciples to the boat. Then He says goodbye to the multitude, to the crowds. And then third, He goes up to the mount to pray. It was already late when this happened. We could assume that it was probably 6 p.m., 6 in the evening, when a furious wind began to rage. Jesus was on His way to the mount. The disciples were heading into the sea, and a wind began to develop. Those winds that our mothers used to say, I think this brings some rain. Notice that Jesus sent the disciples to face the storm alone. That's not a lesser detail, and this is what we have to keep in mind. Jesus sent His disciples to face the storm alone. Jesus didn't ignore the storm. While He went up to the mount, He also felt the gust of wind. He saw the clouds that were coming in, and so He suspected and knew with certainty that there would be a storm. And I insist the disciples would have to face the storm alone. The Lord knew that the greatest storm on that night would have no place in heaven nor in the sea, but in the hearts of His disciples. They had to go through the storm. The greatest fear in these men were not the waves provoked by the storm, but to see the back of their leader as he left them alone to face that night, to face that storm all alone. They were filled with doubts, like some of us are now or have been on a certain occasion, when we see or it appears that the Lord is getting further and further, but the storm is getting closer and closer, and you ask yourself, what wrong have I done to deserve this? Why do I have to go through this situation? Why is the Lord leaving me? That's what we feel, that sensation of being a spiritual orphan. There are snowstorms, hailstorms, rainstorms, but there are also doubt storms. Those that bring along a gust of questions. a wind of fear. Sometimes it seems like there's more hunger in the world than there is food, more needs than there are resources or money, more questions than there are answers. It's never ending. Almost 15, 16 years now that I've stood here every Sunday, and I try to convince the people of an invisible God that still listens to us and still loves. I always say, the Lord loves you so much, princess. The Lord loves you so much, prince. To this day, I have I've been doing this for 901 Sundays, 901 sermons, not counting the chains of 7 days or when I've preached around the world. Today is sermon 901. And even then, there are thousands of preachers that are trying to promote faith in this very moment to many people that are filled with doubts. And I do it knowing that there are people that say, I'm trying to believe what you're saying to me on behalf of the Lord, but the tragedies continue. My world is collapsing. I'm not saying that we're necessarily worried about the war in Ukraine or the conflict in the Middle East, but we literally have a chaos in our own world, and we say, I feel like the Lord turned his back on me. It doesn't matter how many years we've been Christians. I've also seen a few sprinkled with a supernatural faith, and if you have this gift, you can get up and leave now and come back next Sunday because this message is not for you. There are people that say, no, you know what, I came in here anointed, trembling. Yeah, there's people like that. If that's the truth, if that's you, this message is not for you. But like I said at the beginning, this message is for all the others whose mind seems to never rest. And we ask ourselves complex questions, and sometimes we feel like throwing in the towel. It's not that we're maniacs or depressed, but it's just that life hurts us. It doesn't give us a break. We end up on the canvas, and we cannot rest. We have questions. We ask questions the same way the disciples did during that tempest that suddenly came about. Because as soon as Jesus separates himself from them, they get on the boat, go into the sea, and the storm begins. And all they could see were black clouds, black skies, while they were trying to row in that battered boat. It went from 0 to 100. It was a nightmare journey. Waves creating foam. Pessimism that didn't allow them to see the shore. Clouds that looked like dark, heavy smoke. And lightning strikes, lightning bolts that looked like the baton of a orchestra director calling on the drums to rage. Thunder. It wasn't a romantic thunder, but thunder that would make that boat flip upside down like a nutshell. Everyone was trembling as if they had Parkinson's. They would get thrown into the air, and then a second later they'd fall on their faces due to the furious waves. Those that love rides and roller coasters at theme parks, you know that everything's under control. Even though you're left upside down hanging, everything's under control. But when you're at sea, I got to know somebody that embarked on a journey to the high seas, and he said when the storm gets heavy, when it gets strong, there's not a single person that won't pray to something or someone. Nobody's an atheist. You pray to any god in case your god is asleep, just in case. But sea storms are the absolute loss of control. Even more than a plane. It's the absolute loss of control, because a plane is connected to a control tower. Rescue planes can come in the worst of cases if need be, but in the middle of the ocean and in the middle of the sea. In the disciples' case, it's not an ocean, it's a sea. But I'm sure they felt that way, as if they were in the middle of the Pacific or the Atlantic. And they thought that Jesus would come immediately. Why? Because they had seen him calm storms just like this. It's not the first time that they go through this. In that very same sea, they had woken him up. Let's try to remember. During a storm, he was sleeping in the prow, and he woke up and ordered the heavens to calm down, and everything became silent. They had seen how he could calm the wind and the waves. So it's logical that with that jurisprudence, with that preamble, with that precedent, he would come back down from the mount to help. But this time, he didn't come along. That is why I say that this message is for those that say, I saw the hand of God in my life many times, just not now. But I've seen in other times how we prayed and the illness went away. We rebuked, and my mother-in-law couldn't find my home. But no, not this time. It's not working. She's coming over for Christmas. Yesterday, somebody wrote to me, stop joking so much and preach the word. Because there's always a constipated person that finds it hard to laugh. I don't know, maybe gases escaped them when they laugh. I don't know. But the men were cramping in their arms due to so much rowing. And Jesus, nope, no signs. 3 hours later, 4 hours in the storm. And the winds were raging. And the boat was rocking. And no sign of Jesus. It's midnight. Remember, they set out on this journey at 7 p.m. And now it's midnight. And they've been there on the sea for 6 hours. And until now, the storm is winning, as it may be happening to you. Maybe the storm is beating you. And the teacher doesn't appear anywhere. It's almost 2 in the morning in our story, and Jesus still doesn't appear. And Peter, Andrew, James, John have seen storms like this. They're fishermen. Their life is the sea. That's how they earn a living. That's at least what they say to us. And in these years, they have seen shipwrecks on the shore, the mornings after storms. And they've been to funerals of other fishermen, funerals of other sailors, and they know better than anyone that this night could very well be their last. It's not a game. And so why doesn't Jesus come along? If this isn't a game, if this is serious, why doesn't he appear? Questions that I insist we've all asked ourselves at one point or another. And why? In the hospital, trying to see a ray of light. Who hasn't been in a hospital? Sometimes you suffer more in the waiting room than if you were in the ICU where you're semi-drugged and you don't even know where you are. But those that wait in the waiting room, those that are out in the corridors, how many times have we seen? Or have we felt the hope of rebuking or praying? We do all that we can think of. We read the Bible. We confess in faith. We profess faith. We know that Jesus knows what's happening to us. We're not atheists. We say, I know that God knows and sees what I'm going through. He's aware of the storm that is afflicting me, but why doesn't he appear? Why don't we see him anywhere? Why do we have to wait so long? Why do we have to wait until we lose our homes? Why do we have to wait until our children are in danger? Why do we have to wait until our family dissolves and he still doesn't appear? That's where our heart, like I said in the beginning, begins to harden. I'm not trying to justify it. It's just the reality. Because our prayers begin to speckle questions to God. Even questions of rage. I've prayed with rage many times. And yeah, I know God has patience with me. He says, this fool doesn't know that I'm processing him. But many times I've prayed with rage. Lord, if you don't do it, then I'll never serve you again. Oh, and I'm sure I left God worried for months, right? But Peter asks, people ask, where is God and why is he doing this to me? Why? I'm not saying that he provoked the storm, but why is he leaving me all alone? So that pebble of pain shatters the window in our heart, and all we see is Jesus' back as he ascends that mount, and it hurts. Man, does it hurt. The question that those men had was, what hope do we have to survive the storm tonight? And our question is, where is God when my world is raging? Where is God when the enemy appears to be too big, the task seems too hard, the future is too uncertain, And there are too few answers to my questions. Where is he? And here is what I want to share with you. Something I never want you to forget. I'll explain it in just a bit, but I don't want you to forget this axiom, this proverb, this totem. Jesus knows how you feel. I'll say it again. Jesus knows how you feel. Jesus knows how you feel. Did you hear me? Did you record it? And now, so that this phrase isn't just a cliche, a made-up phrase, or just a slogan, so that the phrase has weight, let me tell you what happened to Jesus just one day before this famous storm. Let's go back in time just a little bit, the way they do on Netflix or in movies where we have a flashback and we go back in time. Earlier that day, when the day began, the day of the storm, so that we can see and understand why Jesus went to the mount and left them alone. Before that morning became night, Jesus also had many reasons that day to cry, to run out, shout, and even doubt. If we've ever had one of those days where the whole world demands something of us, I know we've all felt that. We all have these days, especially with our families. When your husband demands something of you, your children, your mother-in-law, your mom, you don't remember your mom now. And you say, Mom, or you say, God, take her with you. She's lived long enough. You know, when the whole world is asking for you, there are people that even get a phone call from the pastor. You should give thanks that I don't call you. Hey, what's going on, brother? I didn't see you last Sunday. Did you go cold? You should say, oh, Lord, thank God I don't have that. So let's look at that day that Jesus lived, especially that day that I insist in the evening he sent the disciples to the sea, yet he went up to pray alone. As soon as he wakes up, I don't even think Jesus had his coffee that morning, when he hears news that his cousin had passed, had died. He was almost a brother to him, his friend, his precursor, John the Baptist. They had murdered his cousin. They had assassinated him. It was news that profoundly hurt Jesus. Both mothers were pregnant at the same time. His mother Mary and John the Baptist's mother gave birth at the same time. So they grew up together, they played together. Then he was the precursor, the one that went out to preach that the Messiah was coming after him. He was the man that was closest to Jesus in his youth, more than any other person. And he had just been murdered. So if you've ever lost a loved one, the person that knew you more than anyone else, because that's what hurts the most. At a funeral, it doesn't hurt so much that they're gone, but that they knew your secrets and that they take them with them. You say, I don't have that person anymore if things get ugly. For me, that person wasn't my father. It was Juan Carlos Ortiz, the founder of this congregation, the one who called me to California, and I could speak about anything with him. That's how he made me feel. I could tell him anything. I could tell him, hey, I just killed someone. And he would say, did you bring another shovel so we could bury him? It's not that he was an accomplice in that murder, but he was just that type of person that you could open up your heart to. And we can speak about our sins without any fear. We can speak about our weaknesses. I didn't have to pretend I didn't feel judged. And when he passed to eternity, I felt that maybe never again would I have a pastor like him, a mentor like him. And I said, Jesus knows what you feel when you lose a loved one. Think about how you would react if they told you that your best friend was decapitated by an incestuous monarch. And you might have a remote idea of how that morning started for Jesus. That's a bad morning. That's what I call starting out a terrible day. But besides that, the news comes with a warning that says, Herod himself, who chopped off John's head, is after your head. The same Herod is interested in seeing you. So that morning when Jesus realizes that John's life was ended and his own life was threatened, Jesus needs to spend some time alone. He needs to think. Because we cannot believe that Jesus, the one who walked on this earth, though he was the Son of God, the Jesus that sat at the right hand of the Father, he came to be born through the womb of Mary. He's a man who lived the same happiness, sadness, pain. He cried. So let's not look at him at like a superhero from Marvel that said, "All right, Herod, come after me." No, that didn't happen. So I assume that when he received that death threat, he also worries for his life. But before he could go to rest and meditate on the sudden death of his friend, the disciples come along. That's the order of the happenings according to Scripture. The Gospel of Mark says that the apostles gathered with Jesus immediately after he had just realized the death of his cousin. But they were there to ask how God's power had backed them. These disciples had come in like rock stars. They were happy because Jesus had commissioned them for them to proclaim the gospel and that they authenticate it with miracles. So they come back saying, "Jesus, Jesus," just as Jesus wants to leave. I insist because he just realized the death of his cousin. The guys came along. They were exultant. "Jesus, Jesus, God used me." They were like Guillermo when he came up to the stage. "We were in Chiapas. We did so much." And Jesus' heart goes from a funereal, gloomy mourning to then having to listen to the hubbub of his disciples. Try to remember, I don't know if you've ever lived a moment like this, where your child wants to tell you something, but you're going through a situation that you cannot share, and your child says, "Dad, I won my soccer match. I've had to go through chaotic moments in my life and mask or hide my sadness because somebody was sharing a testimony with me, a miracle. I was wanting to throw in the towel, saying, I want to go to the other end of the world," and somebody comes, "Dante Gebel, oh, let me share this miracle with you." And I say, "Haha, yes, of course." Because then they'll say, "Oh, it's not the same person who preaches up there. Look at their face." So you have to put on that face. So that's how Jesus is feeling. However, after hearing them, then Jesus tries to go pray. But the crowds had followed the disciples, and so by consequence, they had located Jesus. There were 5,000 men, not counting women and children. Rivers of people coming down from the hills and villages, and they immediately swarmed around Jesus. They all wanted to get to know the man that had imparted so much power into his disciples. From the morning time, Jesus was looking for a moment to mourn his cousin, but now everything around him was bustling activity. And Mark 6:31 relates why so many came and went, to the point where they didn't even have a chance to eat. There were so many people coming and going, and we've all gone through something similar. When the whole world demands something of us, your economy demands something of you, your children, your spouse demands something of you. There are people that go to church and then they're demanded of more there. And we can't even take a few minutes to be alone in the bathroom. You try to remember. How many times have you said, "Oh, I don't even feel like going to the bathroom, but I just want to sit down and stare at my phone. I want to be left in peace." You go to the bathroom. "Mom, are you almost done?" "Oh, you're a grandma." Now, let's imagine 25,000 people. That's what's is calculated to have been there. That's more than the amount of inhabitants that certain cities have. That's what it means to go from calm to chaos in a single morning. So, let's go through it again. First, Jesus is afflicted by the sudden death of his cousin. Then immediately his life is threatened, because Herod also wants to kill him. Then immediately the disciples return, like those unexpected visitors on Christmas Eve. Minutes later, he is about to be suffocated by a multitude, shock, a threat. Who could criticize Jesus for wanting to be alone for just a few minutes, away from the crowds? I'm not going to ask a rhetorical question because we all know the answer, but who here hasn't needed a moment just to be alone? I'm not talking about just a tragedy in the hospital, but even a party where you say, you go outside to breathe or wherever you can. You lock yourself in the bathroom and you begin to... You need a breath. You need to retreat for a moment. I'm not even saying just to pray, but to think about what's happening, a time to evaluate, to regroup, to inspect the damages. A moment without crowds, without demands. I love those moments. Because if I'm not recording for TV, I'm recording for radio. If not, I'm preaching, I'm traveling. So my moments alone, it's a micro world that sometimes I can't even let myself in. ID? Yes, it's me again. Oh. Jesus said that people can wait until tomorrow. And so he tells his men to get him out of there. I think he gives an order above all the shouting of the crowds. He says, "Hey, Peter, Pedro, hey, get me out of here, get me out." Project ejection. Get the bird out of the nest. And they try to eject him. He wants to go because he needs to rest. And so Jesus says, "Come calmly with me to a place so we can rest." He greets the people, and they all say, hey, let me get a picture. Let me get a picture for my grandma. Selfie. Oh, the Lord gives thanks that there was no cell phones. If not, he would have gone up on the cross earlier, sooner. Because before, you would just run into a person with one giant Kodak camera. But nowadays, everybody is a photographer. They don't know how to take pictures. Wait, hold on. Let me set up my camera. I don't know how it works. Oh, it's my grandkids help me out with this, so I don't know how to use it. Oh, I don't know how to get it. And they have the countdown timer. 20, 19, 18. They have the selfie timer. That's where I say, Lord, this woman's 70 years old. She would be much happier up in the celestial choir than down here with their cell phone. People can tire you out. That's how we are. We're tiring. And so when Jesus says, let's eject from here. So the 13 get on the boat. And for a few scarce moments, the Bible doesn't say how long, but I would assume, 3-4 minutes? The whole world is calm again because everything indicates that they were able to get away from shore. But the Bible narrates that the people knew it. They saw them and they followed them. It was a 6-mile walk from the northeast corner of Galilee. So the multitude, the crowds followed them on land. And when Jesus reaches Bethany, his desire to be alone turned into a raging stadium like at the final of a football match. Ole, 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 Jesus. Everyone's shouting. So Jesus' plans are once again interrupted. What he had in mind for that day and what the people had in mind for that day were two completely different agendas. I don't know if this sounds familiar to you, but do you remember when you used to say, oh, today I'm sleeping in. Today I'm sleeping in. I had 2 pills of, what is it? That, yeah, there you go. Melatonin. Which is natural and you're left in a daze. I had 2 melatonin pills, and then the baby has a colic. Or when you had in mind to catch up in the office, you say, you know what, let me catch up on some work, let me get up earlier, but you wake up and you begin to cough and you feel terrible and you fall behind again. Or you wanted to wake up one Saturday morning and do nothing more than watch cartoons, but then a pipe breaks and you have to fix it all day, and it flipped your Saturday upside down. Or what's worse, you put on your pajamas, you sat on the couch, and then you got that phone call from the hospital, and so you spent that night in the hospital. Who hasn't had an agenda like that was shattered because another agenda came in. Jesus knows how you feel. Jesus knows how you feel when you're tired, when you say, I don't even want to serve God anymore, not because of God, but because the people have me so tired. Jesus knows what it feels like to be tired of people. Jesus was also fed up because we're all crazy, rambunctious, neurotic. It happens to me and I'm not Jesus. There are pastors that say, Dante, 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 and they condemn me. And all I want to do is go to the bathroom alone. And they're after me. It's because I came from far away. Look at me. I came from Texas. And so what? Congratulations. Now, we all know that Jesus knows what it means to go through huge tragedies. He went through the cross, through the garden. But we also know that Jesus knows what it means to deal with stress, with anxiety, with the day-to-day. He also knows that maybe that's why on this day, the complete day of the storm, it's registered in all four Gospels. The only other thing that is registered by all four Gospels is the crucifixion. Not Jesus' baptism, not his temptation, not even his birth in detail. But the four write about this day. It's as if Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John knew that one day we would ask ourselves if Jesus understands us. And they proclaim in big, bold letters, Jesus knows how you feel. Jesus knows what daily stress is. It's not that Jesus is on another level, on the level of the conflict in the Middle East, but dealing with grandchildren or a husband that doesn't shower. That's not something that he doesn't contemplate. No. I remember that when I was younger, very, very young, I saw my father as a giant. My dad was never tall, but since I was little, to me he was a giant that without any effort could reach all the jelly jars or cookies stored in the highest cupboard. He didn't have to look for a ladder or a step stool and put his life at risk the way I did when I wanted cookies. And I used to think, oh, life up there must be so easy. He doesn't know what it's like to live down here. That's a phrase that we could never say to God. Never, ever. The writer of the Hebrews in chapter 4, verse 15 says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin." He went through it all. So we took away our right to say, it must be so easy to live your life up there, God, because you don't know what it's like to live down here. No, he knows what it's like to live down here. He knows what it feels like to be down here. He knows that he hasn't forgotten. He intercedes for us. So, he lived all tensions in all ways, without exceptions. That's why he empathizes. He empathizes with all that we feel, because a politician might put on a hard hat and inaugurate a factory. A Christian can take a bag of food to a homeless person. An army general one night sits down to eat dinner with all the other soldiers, no matter the rank, as if he's just another recruit. Because all three are trying to communicate, I can identify with you, I'm like you, I can be like you. Ergo, there's a problem. The employees at the factory know that the politician will take off the hard hat as soon as the photographers and press go away. The homeless person knows the Christian will leave that bag of food, say God bless you, but then they'll go home where a home awaits them with warm dinner. And the soldiers are aware that for each plate of food that the general serves themselves, there are delicacies in the rooms of the officials. The politician, the Christian, and the military official are impartial. The writer of the letter to the Hebrews confirms with clarity that Jesus fully shared our experience. I know that when I preach about seeing Jesus with new eyes, there are many evangelicals that detest me viscerally. I know it. They make it known. They send me their congratulations. I received them. They reached me. I think they've sent me to hell so many times that if I were to go, Satan would say, no, they've sent you too many times. Because it's more attractive to clean the blemishes on the altar. We feel more secure with a Jesus that looks more like a DC hero. There's something impressive about a God who never felt any pain, a God that never laughs. There's something majestic about a God that never frowns. But there's also something very cold and distant in a God that can't relate to what we feel. It's unfair. But God knows exactly what we feel. When people who have other plans interrupt our own, He's already been there. He knows what it feels like when you had planned to spend a whole week on vacation, but then it gets complicated on Monday. Rejection? He's felt it. Temptation? He had that. Loneliness? He lived it. Death? He tasted it. Tiredness and stress? Jesus could write a whole book on that. So He also knew how the disciples felt in the middle of the storm, because they shared that stress. Not as much as Jesus, but Jesus had to spend a moment alone because the day had been fatal. And before night came, He wanted to be alone for just a little while. He didn't even want to be with the gentleman. There are moments where you can't even stand your friend because you want to be alone. So let's go back to our story once again. Like in the series, let's rewind to the night of the storm. The men are rowing against the storm, and suddenly they see something in the middle of the sea. At first, they thought that it was a lightning bolt, but it's a strange sort of light, almost paranormal, that was moving upon the waters. So then a new terror eclipsed their fear of the sea. Could there be something that could make them more afraid even of the sea? Yes. The lightning would strike, and suddenly they could see the figure of a strange spectrum. It's not what they expected. Maybe they expected angels to descend, that the sea would calm. We don't know what they were expecting. But Matthew 14:26 relates that they shouted, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. It wasn't, "Oh," it was, "Ah!" There are moments where your manliness escapes you, and then the voice of Michael Jackson takes over. That happens. I know that you're not all so manly when a rat jumps out at you. Not a little mouse, but a big old rat the size of a cat. Right? And your wife says, "Hey, you go, I'm scared of them." And you say, "Oh, my man. Oh, my tenderness." Anyway, they thought it was a ghost, an apparition. They thought it was a hallucination, and for them, that glow was anything but God. Look at that paradox. They were crying out that God appeared to them, that Jesus appeared to them. Something supposedly supernatural appears, and they don't think that it's Jesus. And the same tends to happen with us. When God doesn't appear in a way we thought He would, we feel that, you know what, this isn't from God. And when it takes longer than what we calculated, or how we speculated or decreed or confessed or believed, then we also think it's not God. Lord, I know that this doesn't happen. This won't go beyond Friday or beyond this month or this year. We say then it's not God because we're so tired and so exhausted that the only thing we see sometimes is a ghost in the darkness. Ghosts in the darkness. But it's God. But for us, these are just new ghosts in the darkness. Because the disciples thought, all right, when Jesus comes along, the sea will be calm like last time. The winds will be calm like last time. Remember when we woke Him up and He said, "Wind, be calm." Why wouldn't He do the same? He's Jesus. He has to do all the same. It's like those preachers that say, if you confess and declare it, then you'll be healed. Why? Because He's done it so many times already. But nobody has the recipe of how God will do it. Not even us parents raise distinct children the same way. Why? I don't know, because each one understands, comprehends in a different way. Because you're not the same age to when you were a first-time parent than when you had your 5th, 6th, 18th child. My parents always told my dad, "Dante does everything with you guys. You guys put up with things that we can never do." But my dad would say, "When I had you, Sergio, I was 20 years old. Now I'm 50. I don't even remember that I have a son." And the first one, you want it to be perfect. You want to give them everything, read them stories. But after the fifth, you say, nah, whatever, let them go. Hey, look, get on your iPad. Mom, what does it mean? Just Google it. Just Google it. Search on Google. What are you asking me? And when we think, oh, when Jesus comes along, the doctor will say that the cancer disappeared. I confess that for the next analysis, the doctor will say, I'm surprised, there's nothing there. But the doctor comes and says, no, it's still growing, there's metastasis. And we see ghosts. We don't see God. Because if it were God, why can't he just get rid of the cancer right away? Why does he have to do it little by little? Why do I have to suffer? If this is from God, the bank will call me. And they'll say, sir, your debts are forgiven. Somebody accidentally hit the delete button. No, the bank says we're going to execute these payments. We think we're going to hear the bank saying, oh, suddenly you have no debt. No, if we have debts, we have to pay the last penny. Refinance. I've had miracles where debts were paid by people all of a sudden, or I've also spent years paying off debts. The problem is that when we're looking for the fire of the bonfire, we miss out on the candle. We try to hear the loud voice, and we miss the whisper. In the Sea of Galilee, nothing had changed. The storm was still raging. The wind was still crying out. The boat was rocking. And in the middle of the racket, they hear a voice. It says, shortly before dawn, let's say it was 4 in the morning, when the night is darkest, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake, walking upon the storm. The storm still hadn't calmed down. He wanted to tell them, I am the Christ who can walk upon your storm. I don't need to calm it for you to believe me. I can walk on your crisis. I can walk upon your pain. And he says to them, take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. And as they saw Jesus, it's not that they still thought it was a ghost. Scripture says that they saw Jesus walking on the lake. They panicked. They felt fear. I have learned that faith is a daughter of fear. I was never taught it. I learned it through blows. Faith is a daughter of fear. For example, Peter knew what that type of storm could do to someone. He was a fisherman more than anyone else. He was an old sailor. He had heard stories of shipwrecks. He knew the widows of certain fishermen. There wasn't a single week where there wasn't a funeral on the shores of Galilee due to a boat that capsized or ended up in shipwreck. And he knew that storms like this could kill. And he wanted to escape that storm from 6 in the evening. He had wanted to escape that boat all night, all morning, for 9 hours. He had fought against the storm, the waves. He had rowed like never before. But nothing, no hope. He was drenched in sweat. He was tired, even his last bone. Have you ever been there? I have. Not on that boat, but yes, tired, exhausted. My last fiber, every atom of my being was exhausted. So if now we see Peter on this scene and we look him in the eyes, we will see the face of fear. But this fear, from this fear, an act of faith would be born. And that's what always happens, because I insist. Faith tends to be the daughter of fear. What I'm trying to say is that Peter had seen Jesus walking upon calm waters on a serene night, a spring night, and he never would have asked him to walk towards him, to help him walk towards him. No! And we wouldn't either. If I had been born in a household of rich parents, I never would have rented a single stadium by faith. I never would have set out on an act of faith. You think the opposite, that if there's a whole lot of money, you do great things, but no. No, you stay in the safe zone and you don't do anything. Many of you wouldn't be in this country if things had turned out well or the way you thought they would while you were still in your country. I've seen many crossing the border desperately, trying to give a bit of dignity to their families, and you've come alone here to fight fist to fist with life, a life that's much more difficult than life in our countries, especially when you're not here legally, to just send some resources back, to put food on the table for your children. For that you need fear to not die of hunger. For that you need fear of not remaining in poverty. And fear produces faith. That's what we're made of, those of us that have had fear. And amongst other things, I never would have preached a single message if I never had or felt panic when I spoke the first time. It was the fear of not having anything to lose that brought me here. And the same goes for the majority of you. A calm lake always invites us to remain on the boat. If not, ask many of your children. Some are old enough, but they don't want to run any risks. They don't want to do anything because mom and dad take care of me. In the end, I get depressed if I don't have the latest phone. That last generation has to do with people that have never feared losing it all. But put a man to choose between a certain death or a probable death, and he'll always pick the latter. Peter knew that staying on the boat was a certain death, but getting off was a probable death. No act of faith is born on a calm sea. Show me a man or a woman that is born from an act of faith, and I'll show you someone that wasn't there during a low tide. Moses didn't open the sea with his staff because a boat was waiting for him already. And Peter wasn't set free from prison because in a small room in Jerusalem there was a group of lawyers, a buffet of lawyers, wanting to appeal to Caesar. No, they were desperate believers that were between a rock and a hard place. At the beginning of every act of faith, there's always a seed of fear. If you're not afraid, then most likely God is not present. If you're not afraid, then there won't be any faith. Do you die of panic due to certain things? Yeah, me too. There's not a moment where you get so professional that your fear goes away. No, it terrifies me every Sunday to be here. I'm afraid to not say what God is telling me to say, or to not be at the height of the message, or to fail God in one way or another. There's not a single moment where I don't fear. And sometimes the fear of death, the fear of failure, the fear of loneliness, they produce scenes of faith. Faith begins when we see that our boat is sinking, yet God is standing there upon our storm. Peter tried to survive all night, but it wasn't enough. Moses was facing the sea, and behind him were his enemies. The Israelites could either swim or fight. Neither of the options were enough. Naaman had tried out medicine and had consulted with witches, but it wasn't enough. A miracle was needed, and the same thing is happening with Peter that night. He is aware of two things, that he's sinking and that Jesus is afloat. That he is sinking, but Jesus is still afloat. So it's very clear what side he wants to be on. Peter says, if it's you, then let me walk towards you. Let me walk upon the water. And Andrew looks at him and says, what? That I want to walk upon the water. Well, I heard you, but what? Peter isn't testing Jesus. He's begging him. He's saying, get me out of here. Let these guys drown. Take a step on that raging sea. It's not a matter of logic. It's an act of despair. So Peter takes out a leg, and then takes out the other, and he takes a few steps as if there were an invisible reef beneath his feet. And at the end of that rock, there's a glow of a friend, which means life. It's an act of faith and despair. Faith isn't born at the negotiation table where we exchange our gifts for a miracle from God. Come on. Faith isn't born by decreeing it at a prophetic conference. No. They're scamming you. Faith also isn't born by creating a pact for a miracle. No, those are scams to steal your money. Faith isn't a reward that is given because you confessed faith. No, it's not a title for those that profess themselves as apostles. No. Faith is a dive into your fear, but believing that God will bring you out of those waters. Somebody needs to believe that, yes or no? And in the letter to the Ephesians, Paul writes about this type of faith. For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith. And this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. This is about hearing his voice and taking that step. Just like Peter, we are aware of two acts. That we are drowning, but he is still afloat. That's all we'll know. That's all the information you need. You say, but the cancer continues. Yeah, but the Lord is still afloat. But my economic storm gets worse and worse. Yeah, but your God is afloat. Your problem would be you saying, I saw God and he was also drowning, but while he was afloat, you have to try and survive. Continue to keep your eyes fixed on him. Let's abandon the Titanic of our Phariseeism and let's stand firm on God's grace. And surprisingly, we'll walk upon the water. And when people ask us, how can we keep ourselves firm in times of sickness and of crisis and times of family problems, let's not boast or brag. We have to point without hesitation to the one that makes it possible. We have to say, I fixed my eyes on him. And sing, turn your eyes on Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face. And the things of earth will glow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Fix our eyes on him, always. Some people, different to Peter, never look back, and I celebrate you. Others, like myself, have been like Peter. You feel the winds, and you're filled with fear again. Maybe we face the fear of pride. Well, I can't be so bad, because look, I'm walking upon the water. Look at me, look what I can do. Maybe we face the wind of legalism. Well, I know Jesus is doing a part of it, but I'm doing the rest, and I take care of my holiness. However, the majority of us, we all face the wind of doubt. I'm too great of a sinner to be rescued. I don't deserve to be rescued. And we sink deeper into our guilt. Some of us open up our eyes and all we see is darkness. We try to breathe, but there's no oxygen. And we try desperately to swim back to the surface. And with our heads barely above water, we have to make a decision. The arrogant ask themselves, I'm going to save my appearance. And so maybe I prefer to drown in my pride. Yeah, that's a possibility. Or I cry out asking for help. I cling on to God. A legalist asks himself, am I going to drown under the weight of the law, or should I abandon the doctrine and walk by faith and grace? Well, we know Peter's decision. It says that when he began to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me! And immediately, Jesus lifted him up. And let me share something else with you. I'm sure that the disciples, if they could turn back time in a flashback, they would do it again. They'd go back on that boat. I mean, the men would go onto that same boat and navigate that same storm. How do I know this? Because through the storm, for the first time, they were able to see their Savior. For the first time, Matthew 14:33 says, then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Really? Now you realize it? My little tenderness? After the storm, they worshipped him for the first time. As a group, they had never done this before. Prove it. Look for it in the Bible at home. They never worshipped him together. Look for another occasion where the disciples as a group worshipped him. You won't find it. You won't find a moment, not even when he healed the leper or forgave the adulterous woman, not even when the crowds followed. They left their families, they built an army, they cast out demons, but they only worshipped him after the incident of the sea. Why? Simple. Because this time they were the ones being saved. This time it was their necks that were exposed. They had been pulled out of the sea. They were about to fall into the abyss, and a second later, they found themselves on a boat in a calm sea. So for the first time, these guys worshipped. They did the only thing you can do when the Lord suspends a death sentence. Lift your eyes and worship. And so when you recognize God as creator and you see the stars in the heavens and the mountains here in California, you say, Lord, I admire you. When we recognize his wisdom, we say, Lord, oh, I learned from you. When we discover his strength, Lord, I rest in you. But only when he saves us do we get on our knees to worship. Only when he saves us do we say, Lord, you've saved me. Hallelujah. Somebody needs to worship more than that with an applause. Come on. I believe it. And so, this is a scene of a before and after. Before our rescue, we kept God at a distance. It's not that we stopped being Christians, but we would come here once a week, 2 hours, and then go home. Yeah, God's important, but we also have vacations. Yeah, God's important, but also my job, the house I want to buy, my dream car. And so God shares his place with other priorities. But then one day the storm comes. The fury, the fighting, the battles, nights without stars, and then your house, your car, and your cell phone don't matter because a cancer comes along, divorce, bankruptcy, addiction, fragile health. You get fired, and it puts our ducks in a row. Despair falls upon us like fog, and we lose sight. And that's when we foolishly realize that not even our job, not our vacations, not our lovers, not sex can bring us out of that storm. And we notice that a storm will never be impressed by our titles, not by our home. And when we realize that we have one option, the only one that remains afloat is God, that's when you cry out genuinely, and he comes. And from that moment, he's not just a God that we can admire, or a teacher that we can follow, or a boss that we can obey. He's our Savior. And a Savior deserves to be worshipped. That's why I say that the disciples would do it again. They would deal with the storm that night. My beloved, a season of storms is a small price to pay, when after all you'll obtain a very clear vision of God. I have such a clear vision of God, and it hasn't come due to the amount of prayer or my spirituality. No, I'm a storm pilot. And in each storm, I have seen the Lord. Never forget that image, that at first, he looks like a ghost, but then he brings calmness. There are moments that leave a mark on us forever. And we all give thanks for these moments. I call them nights of controlled storms, because those nights, those storms where God allows us to get scared just enough to feel like we have no options, and then we'll need him. And then he gets close enough for us to see him. At first, we feel the disorientation of the shipwreck, of course, but the good thing about this is that it obligates us to seek God with an intensity that we wouldn't have in any other way. The seasons and unforeseen storms put us on our knees, and they make us dependent on the Lord. All the new chapters in my life always begin with an enormous tempest, always. I don't ask for them. It's not that I'm a masochist. I don't pray for them to come, but they always appear. And like a pilot of many storms that I've lived through, I'm going to give you advice that you're not asking me for, but it's always worked for me. Cling on as strongly as you can to the first mast that you find aboard. and resist. Resist the next diagnosis. Resist the next payments. Resist it. Don't stop having faith. Sooner or later, I promise you, the teacher will come. Have a lot of peace. Psalm 46 says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. The ghost you see afar is not just a ghost. The voice you hear is not the raging wind. Jesus is closer than you ever dreamt, and he is still afloat. Everyone, come on, it comes. There it is, walk upon the storm, walk. Walk upon the storm, there it is. Come on, celebrate. Here comes the King. Here he comes to the rescue. The cavalry is coming. Here he comes. Come on, lift up your hands to heaven if you can. For a moment, everyone. You're going to get off the boat. Here's what I'm going to prescribe. Here's what you're going to take. You're going to take what I'm going to prescribe at least once a day. You're going to make decisions. And amongst those decisions, you're going to take one leg out, then take the other, and you're going to walk upon the very same storm that makes you panic today. You're going to walk, and you're going to realize that God is the greatest. In matters of storms, He goes beyond any tempest. Do not fear. You will walk upon the waters. You will know a new God, a different God. And stop asking, why didn't you come sooner? Why did you allow the storm? Why didn't we stay on the shore? He should have stopped it. Nah, He doesn't process His children that way. He doesn't have spoiled children. He doesn't put knee pads and elbow pads so that they don't get hurt. He wants men and women, adults. He doesn't want eternal children. He doesn't want to fatten up the baby. He wants us to grow to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. And you're going to come out on the other side larger than you are now. You're going to be harder in the best of terms. Not just any wind will scare you. You're going to know what it means to have rode in the storm, to be a storm pilot. You're going to get out ahead and nothing will scare you because you're an old sailor. You come from adverse situations that forged you and that make you who you are now. So keep your hand up high and say, Lord, here I am. I feel like I'm drowning, but I see you and you're not drowning. You're firm upon my storm. The storm hasn't calmed. I know it. I'm not saying, see the miracle, the storm is calm. No. It might last. It might last from here to the end of the year or through next year. I don't know. I cannot promise. Because I'd be scamming you if I told you the storm will end today or Tuesday or Wednesday. No, it'll last however long it needs to last. But you will not die. You will not perish. This will not be fatal. I promise you, you'll get out of this. You'll get out of this one. You'll get out of this one. But you'll get out of it once you can finally walk towards Him. And if walking you drown, then the same thing is going to happen to you. What happened to Peter? He will not let you drown. He'll hold you up and say, you tried, you believed. And you'll have a story to tell your grandchildren. You'll share with them that you went through a tempest and you survived. You're a survivor. And that you worship the Lord for the first time when He gave you a second opportunity to live. You worship when you have a second chance. You realize that words from a stage sound different than when you've gone through storms, because the teacher no longer speaks. It's not someone speaking on behalf of the Creator or on behalf of the provider. No, the Savior speaks to you. The one who saved your life. The one who saved your life. That day, everybody began to celebrate their second birthday. The day they were born and the day the Lord saved their lives in that storm. And they began to live and give thanks. And there was no more Caesar, no Herod, no Roman Empire, no Greek Empire that could scare them. Because they had been with the Creator of the storms. And they knew that He could turn them off as soon as He wanted. And if He didn't stop them, it's because it was the purpose in His will to not stop. That's understanding the process. That is giving thanks for the process. Say, Lord, thank you. I'm learning something. You're teaching me something. Thank you. Because you know what I'm going through. Because you understand me. Thank you, Lord. It's you. It's not a ghost. It's you. Things haven't changed. The storm is still roaring. The hurricane is coming, but you are still afloat. You remain. And He says, don't give up. Don't give in. Don't let your arms down. Come on. Don't give in. Don't give up, says the Lord. Don't give up. Don't raise the white flag. Just run to me. I rejoice in taking you to the alley with no exit. Because I'm going to lift you up. I'm going to bless you. I will do things through you that no eye has seen, nor ear has heard, nor has risen to the heart of man. The Lord blesses you. The Lord blesses you. Receive, receive, receive. Current of the Spirit. I blow now. Impressive. Everyone, presence of God. Blow now more than the storm. Wind of the Spirit. Go beyond the storm. Feeling of the Spirit. Go beyond the storm. I believe it. Whoa. Impressive. I declare it to those that are here for the first time. To those that are hearing of you, Christ, for the first time, those that want to receive you, just say, Lord, come into my heart, come into my life, forgive my sins. Write my name in the book of life. Father, thank you. I've transmitted to your army, to your people, what I believe you told me to say. Beloved church, I bless you. I bless your entry, your exit, when you go to bed and when you wake up. May you have winds in your favor. May you resist the storm. Resist. I'll see you at shore whenever God stipulates it. And we'll celebrate that we're sailors that have survived. I'll say it like a captain of a ship who's gone through dozens of storms. You always survive. Always. Some are worse than others. You might swallow more water and some more than others, but you always survive. Because if God is on the boat or upon the sea, He's always there. And even if He stayed on the mount, on the hill, He's always aware. I bless you. Have a great day, people. Have a great Sunday. Eat well. Enjoy. Sleep well. I'll see you next Sunday. Bye.
Apareciste una noche de soledad, abandonado y perdido te reconocí. Tu voz diciéndome no temas, yo estoy aquí. El Padre me envió por ti y me curaste las heridas, me sanaste, mi Jesús. Todas mis cargas las dejaste allí en la cruz. Algo tan grande no lo puedo comprender. Oigo tu dulce voz diciéndome una y otra vez: oh, 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 eres bienvenido, eres amado una y otra vez. Oh, 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 bienvenido a River, eres amado. Apareciste en una noche de soledad, abandonado y perdido te reconocí. Tu voz diciéndome no temas, yo estoy aquí. El Padre me envió por ti. Y me curaste las heridas, me sanaste, mi Jesús. Todas mis cargas las dejaste allí en la cruz. Algo tan grande no lo puedo comprender. Oigo tu dulce voz diciéndome una y otra vez.
Eres bienvenido, eres amado.
Una y otra vez.
Bienvenido al libre.
Eres amado.